need you to stay quiet. This is a me thing. It is not a we thing. You got that?
Fine, but make it quick.
Open on 5.
One of, I think, our great hopes for future films is other articulations of Venom.
As fans of the comics will know, Carnage is the bond between Cletus Cassidy, a serial killer, and the Red Symbiote. And so this movie will introduce Cletus Cassidy.
Hi, Eddie.
Carnage is the promise of the Venom character taken to the next level. So, you know, going into Venom, you were hoping that there'd be Carnage. And they delivered in a very delightful way that made you go, all right, I'll give you more of my money if you do this again.
Welcome back, everybody. It's Charlie. We got a whole bunch of new Venom 2, Carnage, and Spider-Man stuff to talk about, so we'll break it down. I know there are a lot of rumors about what's going on with Spider-Man now and the Sony Spider-Verse in the Venom movies. I will address that during the video. We're doing a Spider-Man Far From Home Blu-ray giveaway. All you have to do to enter is be a subscriber and leave your best theory about Venom 2 on the video. The cool thing about that Carnage Venom 2 teaser is them talking about future iterations of the Venom symbiote. We'd like to do more versions of the character. They're also talking about going beyond Carnage. That means if you really want them to do Toxin, they're probably planning on doing him at some point. Venom 2 is getting ready to shoot in London during November. There's a very important reason why they're shooting it in November, because the movie is not going to take place in San Francisco like the first movie did. Woody Harrelson is coming back as Carnage, Michelle Williams is coming back for Anne Wang and more She-Venom. They said that they really liked the way that went down in the first film, and Michelle Williams really liked playing that version of the character, so they're going to double down on that a little bit. Andy Serkis is going to be the director, probably the most famous motion capture artist in the world right now. Makes sense, he's a solid pick for working with Tom Hardy, the Venom and Carnage characters, any other future symbiotes that you want to do. The working title of the movie is Fillmore. That's just a reference to the Fillmore music venue in San Francisco. The first movie took place in San Francisco. That's the only real significance of that working title. No huge Easter eggs. The Tom Holland Spider-Man movies used Seinfeld references as their working titles. The working title for Spider-Man Homecoming was Summer of George, which is the title of a Seinfeld episode, and the one that they used for Spider-Man Far From Home was Fall of George. The reason why they picked Summer of George for Spider-Man Homecoming was because they kept talking about that episode during pre-production. They were obsessed with Seinfeld. They thought it was really funny to use that as the working title of the movie. Then when it came time to shoot Spider-Man Far From Home, they just continued the joke. But a lot of you may have realized the really important reason why the Venom 2 movie is shooting in London is mostly because they're doing more Sony Spider-Verse world building with the Venom vs. Carnage fight, but also crossing it over with Jared Leto's Morbius spin-off movie, because that movie shot in London near Manchester to make it look like New York City. The actual plot of the Morbius movie takes place in New York City, which means that Venom 2 might also be taking place in New York City. Suddenly everyone's spidey sense is going off like crazy. I'll address the Spider-Man of it all in a second. The Morbius movie isn't coming out till July next year after Comic-Con, but odds are pretty good we'll see some sort of Venom reference at the end of that movie, setting up the reason why Venom has to go to New York City from San Francisco. Because it's all about him fighting Carnage. Carnage doesn't have the symbiote yet. He's stuck in San Quentin prison near San Francisco. So Venom going to New York City in the sequel probably has something to do with either Carnage escaping prison after he gets the symbiote, or him being transferred to a New York City prison like Rikers. Because in the comics, the Carnage origin story happens when Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy are cellmates in a New York City prison. It's not clear how faithful they'll be to the comic book Carnage origin story in the movie, but there has to be a reason for the Venom symbiote to spawn an offspring in proximity to Cletus Cassidy. Otherwise, the only other way to explain how he gets the symbiote is that someone's experimenting on the Venom symbiote and somehow it spawns and then he gets it. You can make all kinds of theories about the Morbius movie and him having something to do with Carnage eventually getting the symbiote, but it feels too soon to completely cross all those characters over yet. So I'm still expecting Venom 2 to just be Venom Carnage with a little bit of Morbius and a little bit of Spider-Man that I'll talk about in a second. Because let's just address the New York City Spider-Man-shaped elephant in the room. If the movie does take place in New York City and they confirm that they're crossing over Tom Holland's Spider-Man with the Venom franchise, how long can Venom, Carnage, and Morbius now, who's also in New York City, fight before Spider-Man takes notice and tries to do something about it? Post all your SpongeBob memes in the comments. There was a rumor that because of the Marvel Sony split, now Sony was going to lean into all this Venom crossover business and they'd find some way to tease Spider-Man crossover during Venom 2, but he wouldn't be a big part of the plot. Maybe just a reference to Spider-Man during the post-credit scene so that they can do Maximum Carnage for Venom 3, because that feels like the direction they're taking this franchise. Then they can still do Spider-Man 3 in 2021, setting up Sinister 6 separately from all the Venom stuff, but also teasing some Venom crossover at the end of Spider-Man 3. But the timeline of Venom 2, the Morbius movie, and Spider-Man 3 is not totally clear, because it sounds like all those movies take place in New York City, and even though it's a really big city, you have to have a timeline that makes sense for why they're not all together on screen right away. The Morbius movie next year is probably going to do most of that work. And even if Sony and Marvel aren't sharing the character and Sony can no longer use Iron Man or the Avengers characters, they can still use the timeline created by Avengers Endgame. It can still be 2023 in present day. But the easiest way that they can just avoid any complications with that is just by not referencing what year it is at all during the movie. Just to avoid confusion, just say that the actual crossover movie, Spider-Man 4 or Venom 3, is just set in present day. The thing about Spider-Man and Venom versus Carnage in a Maximum Carnage movie, though, that people have not been talking about is Morbius and the other Spider-Verse spin-off movies that Sony is trying to do. There's a Silk movie, there's still a Kraven movie that they're clearly trying to set up during this Morbius movie. Look at these trucks, there's Kraven written all over the side of them. It sounds kind of like they want him to be a Morbius villain at some point. Why would you put this on the side of a truck so prominently in broad daylight if you didn't intend on using the character in a big way? We're still kind of in the middle of convention season right now. Tom Holland just did a convention appearance where he talked about the Marvel Sony split. He said that they'd already pitched the story of Spider-Man 3 to Sony, that they had new crazy crossovers in the Sony Spider-Verse planned. This is the clip of him talking about that.
It's not the end of me playing Spider-Man. There's definitely more to come. I sat down with some of our creatives and we pitched Spider-Man 3, which is going to be something very special, something very different. And, you know, I'm just so grateful that Marvel changed my life and allowed my dreams to come true. And Sony are allowing me to continue living my dream. So, you know, it's a crazy thing, and it's never been done before, but we'll see how it goes, and it'll be as amazing and as fun.
So in all these appearances, all these interviews he's been doing, he's been trying to hype up the idea that they have new, quote-unquote, interesting crossover ideas, very clearly trying to tell us that yes, we're going to be doing a lot of Venom crossover in the future. There was another rumor recently a lot of you asked me to address in a video about Spider-Man coming back into the MCU as part of a new deal that required that they let Venom into the MCU. That was part of Sony's terms. Right now, I don't believe that rumor. I'm trying to take most of what they're saying with a grain of salt, but the Sony CEO did say that for the time being, there was no deal to be had. They're going to continue making Spider-Man 3 on their own. If Marvel and Sony come back to the table, it's probably not going to be till around the time they get ready to release Spider-Man 3. So don't worry, because there wasn't going to be a lot of Spider-Man in Marvel Phase 4 movies outside of Spider-Man 3 anyway. So it's not like you're suddenly missing a whole lot of Spider-Man that you otherwise would have gotten. We're still going to get Spider-Man 3 in 2021. There's still potential for them to work out a sharing arrangement and him to come back during Avengers 5, but that's not going to happen during Marvel Phase 4 anyway, so they still have plenty of time to figure that out, and in the meantime, he can do all these Venom crossovers. He can get the symbiote, so you can finally get true black costume Tom Holland Spider-Man, and then he can come back to the MCU and tell everybody about the crazy adventure he had with the symbiote from outer space. On the Venom side of all this crossover stuff, the last time Tom Hardy talked about crossing over with Tom Holland's character was during Comic-Con last year, and because that was before the big Sony Marvel split, he was still talking about it as if it would have been him coming into the MCU. This is the clip of him talking about that.
First of all, Venom stands alone. It has its own universe. Do you know what I mean? And it was already a complete standalone piece. So when I read it, I'm quite mercenary and quite selfish in that aspect. I'm very, very happy to have a standalone character within the Marvel context and world, but all to myself. So I'm kind of greedy in that aspect. But at the end of the day, that's kind of above my pay grade, and also it's not my daddy's tractor. So I don't know where it fits in the grand scheme of things. But I would never rule anything out.
The funny thing about that is that he's trying to be as political as possible. Clearly, he's a little bit better at this than Tom Holland, like he isn't giving away big spoilers or anything like that. But what he's saying is that when they pitched him the Venom movie, they said that it'd be a solo movie. They probably teased the idea that he might cross over with Tom Holland's Spider-Man character, but it's a franchise meant to be built around him, not around Spider-Man. So a lot of times the actors aren't really clued in to the really big things that are going on in the background with these crossovers. They just take it one movie at a time. That being said, he does say that he's a huge fan of the idea, so of course he wants to cross over with Spider-Man at some point. But everybody, post your Venom 2 theories in the comments below. Do you actually think there's going to be a Spider-Man post-credit scene? And how do you think they're going to try and connect the Morbius movie to the Venom sequel? As long as the movies are good, I'm totally cool with whatever they want to try, as long as they eventually let Spider-Man come back into an MCU film for Avengers 5. That's all I care about. They can do whatever they want to in the meantime. There's a bunch of new Marvel stuff I'm working on this weekend. As long as you have alerts enabled for my channel, you should see all the videos when I post them. Congratulations, Dave Suggs. You're the giveaway winner from my last big Marvel video. Please email me on the About page of my channel so I can get your details. Everybody click here for my brand new Avengers Fantastic Four teaser video, and click here for all my Spider-Man Easter egg videos. Thank you so much for watching. Everybody stay awesome. I'll see you guys tonight.